time for another matchmaking episode. UFC Denver was just this past weekend. Went through, did the full recap earlier this week. First reaction, whatever you want to call it. Go check that out if you haven't seen it. Here are all the fighters we're going to be making matchups for. Luana Santos, Damon Blackshear, Montel Jackson, Fatima Klein, Jasmine Jastovicius, Joshua Van, Charles Johnson, C-Rod, Julian Erosa, Gabriel Bonfim, Drew Dober, Gene Silva, and then the main event, Tracy Cortez and Rose Namajunas. And actually, before we get into the first person, I've been teasing kind of the unranked rankings that I've been working on. Finally got that finished, so all of the matchups I'm going to be doing from now on are going to be based off of my rankings outside of the rankings. So I went through for each weight class and ranked all the unranked fighters on the roster. So I'll be using my own rankings for that now. I didn't always agree with the unranked rankings that were available online, so I thought I'd make my own. I'll update them every week just to keep updated, and I think I'm going to make a video on them, just kind of show everyone, and then I'll probably do an update video to go along with my normal videos throughout the week. Just add that in as another video we can do. But yeah, let's get into it. First up, Luana Santos. Like I said, she's on a good little streak now. Got the win this past weekend over Maria Agapova, as she should. She hasn't had the toughest of competition yet. She beat Juliana Miller in her debut, which again she should, and then she had some weight troubles. She had to go up to 135, still missed weight at 135 pounds, but was able to beat Stephanie Egger, who's definitely a step above her two other opponents. In that next one, back down at 125 pounds, and she made weight. So kind of an interesting situation there. I think she's talked about it before. She has some sort of condition that sometimes makes weight an issue for her. I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to speak too much on it. But then, like I said, yeah, back down to 125, gets the win versus Agapova, somebody who has flirted with the rankings kind of in and out before, and most recently has just lost to somebody in the rankings, if I'm not mistaken, or somebody who has a ranked fight coming up, I believe Miranda Maverick, and then before, I believe it was Miranda Maverick, Priscilla Cachoeira. We know her, zombie girl, you know what she's going to do. She's going to bring a fiery pace early while she can, move forward, throw bombs, do what she can to get you out of there early. And this will be a definite step up in competition for Luana, but she has to take that step up before we can see her in the rankings. 3-0 so far in the UFC. We take that step up in competition if she can get it done. Then we start talking about rankings, and if Priscilla Cachoeira can get the win, she needs to turn it around. I believe it's 2 losses in a row for her now, so if she can get one, maybe then she can start to grab a couple more, and then she can get back in the rankings conversation. But for now, I do think this would be a fun fight. I think it makes sense for both two with where they are at. Next up, Damon Blackshear. Super, super quick knockout. 18 seconds versus Montel Jackson. This is kind of, with these kind of fights, because there are certain divisions that have a lot of people, and certain divisions that don't outside of the rankings, so you're either always, in some of them, you're always real close to the rankings, and a couple wins can get you in, but with weight classes like 35, 45, 55, there's a lot of fighters outside, and so these kind of fights, it's against guys that are middling in the outside of the rank, not middling in talent, but middling in their position where they are right now, and they need wins to kind of get back towards where they can be in the conversation for a ranked fight. That's what he needs to do. Somebody who's kind of on the up in that way, Muin Gafurov. He started off his UFC career 0-2, most recently was able to get his first UFC win versus Kyung Ho Kang. I believe before that he wasn't facing any bums either, like his 0-2 to start. One of them was a loss to Said Nurmagomedov, who is no slouch, and in your second fight, that's obviously tough. Even in your fourth fight, Damon Blackshear's a tough ask. These guys have both had some pretty tough fights early on in their career. Damon Blackshear looking to get back on track. I believe 2 losses in a row again. Mario Bautista's no like scrub, so that loss isn't an awful loss to have, but he does want to get back in the win column, and Muin Gafurov now looking to build on that win versus Kyung Ho Kang, see if he can get some momentum and move himself up towards that top 15 if he can. Next up, the winner of that Montel Jackson, Damon Blackshear fight, Montel Jackson, the super quick knockout. He's on 5 wins in a row. I believe he's either 8-2 or 7-2 in the UFC. He was scheduled so he just got the Damon Blackshear knockout. Before that, he was able to get a finish over Ronnie Aya. In between those fights, he was supposed to have a ranked matchup versus Chris Gutierrez. Some sort of circumstance didn't allow that fight to happen. He ends up taking a bit of time off, gets this Damon Blackshear fight. He needs to stop all this time off. I think if we can get him in here quick turnaround, we need to get him a ranked fight. Pedro Munoz, 2 losses in a row now. I believe he just most recently lost to Kyler Phillips, if I'm not mistaken. He needs to defend his rank now. The loss to Kyler Phillips was somebody out of the ranking. Kyler Phillips gets in the rankings now. Pedro Munoz still holds that 15 spot, so he needs to defend it. If he doesn't win, he's out of the rankings. Montel Jackson in, and I do think Montel Jackson deserves this opportunity. 5 in a row, 8-2 in the UFC. His 2 losses are to some tougher guys, some grapplers that could definitely counter him. I believe it was Ricky Simone and Brett Johns, not in the UFC anymore, but decent grappler. And then next up, Fatima Klein. This is an interesting one because super highly touted prospect coming into the UFC, and obviously she takes a short notice fight, short notice replacement for, I can't remember who Jastovicius was supposed to fight. Might have been Miranda Maverick. No, not Miranda Maverick. I can't remember who it was supposed to be, but regardless, the fight falls out. Fatima Klein steps in on short notice for her debut against a ranked opponent, up a weight class. She took the opportunity she had to. She came up short. Jastovicius was just too big. I say we get her in there in her own weight classes, in her own weight class versus a debut level opponent. Somebody who just recently made their debut and won a split decision that not everybody thought she won. Puja Tomar. I think we get these 2 in there. Again, these are both debut level fighters. Obviously, maybe there's a different level of hype around the prospect that Fatima Klein is, but this is definitely a fight to just kind of get her into her own division. I don't want to say she should win it because obviously it's a fight. Puja Tomar can definitely go in and do it, but I do think this is a fight. If Klein is the prospect that we think she can be, she should go in there, get this win, and start off her UFC win streak. See if she can get a good one going. Next up, we've got the winner of that fight, Jastovicius. This one is pretty simple, to be honest. Just outside of the rank or inside of the rankings. I don't know why I can't remember who she was supposed to fight. I can just look it up. I don't know why let's see. I don't know why I'm sitting here wondering when I can check. Vivian Araujo, that's right. So I guess you could remake that one. I have her matched up later down the line, so I guess that matchup you could do here makes sense. Or makes sense in this instance too, just rebooking that. And also, you could probably throw in Ariana De Silva in place of Vivian Araujo for the matchup I made later. So they kind of all can rotate in this spot, but just getting her a fight inside the rankings. She earned her rank. The win over a debuting opponent doesn't really do much for her. She needs to get in there versus somebody that is ranked. Ariana De Silva, formerly Ariana Lipski, just ranked 1 spot above her. Let's get it done. And again, I wouldn't be mad about getting the Vivian Araujo matchup either. It makes sense for this one and the one I have later down the line, which you could probably guess who it is because there's not too many flyweights that I'm matchmaking for. Next up, though, a men's flyweight, Joshua Van. He was on a tear starting off his UFC career 3-0, was just climbing the rungs, got to an opponent that was more his level because, I mean, Kevin Borjas, good. I believe the other guy he fought was Felipe Bunez, good, but nothing crazy. Zhalgas Shumagulov, good, but he definitely needed that step up in competition, and I thought he was actually handling it pretty well against Charles Johnson. I thought I had him in the moment up 2-0. The first round was extremely close. I wouldn't be mad if you called it 1-1 going into that third. 1-1, 2-0, whatever you want to call it. Joshua Van was in the fight going into the third. He gets clipped behind the ear and marked with the uppercut from hell from Charles Johnson. And now we need to get him back in there with somebody who's still going to challenge him. So he takes this loss. I don't want him to go back down to the Zhalgas Shumagulov level of competition. Obviously, you're going to have to fight those guys coming up, but I want to see him be able to compete with this level of guys, the Charles Johnsons, the Nate Manuses. But the only problem with this, and so I'll talk about Nate Maness real quick, actually, just why it makes sense, I think. He moves down to flyweight after being a bantamweight, loses his first matchup. I believe it was a tougher matchup. I can't remember exactly who it was, but I remember it being a tough first flyweight matchup. Regardless, though, he knocks off his next 2 opponents, so he's kind of on the up in the flyweight division after moving down, and Joshua Van was on this rise, 3-fight win streak, fighting Charles Johnson, possibly looking towards the ranking if he can get that win. He loses, so they're kind of meeting here. whoever wins can get back into that ranked conversation. But the issue, like I was going to say, Manus just put out a tweet or an Instagram post or something that his contract is up. He hasn't been re-signed yet. He's going into free agency. The UFC can still offer him like a matched contract or a better contract, whatever. So he's going to test free agency, I guess. He's also not sure if he's going to retire or not. He may just end up doing that if the offer doesn't suit what he wants, he said. So we'll see what happens there. So I did just make another backup, and a guy who I think has had kind of a tough run. He's not a grappler. Well, that's unfair. He's a decent grappler, but he's faced nearly strictly wrestlers so far. Carlos Hernandez. Let's get him in there with a striker. He has a win over Dennis Bondar. They did a little bit of striking there. He proved what he can do. Was able to stuff some takedowns in that fight too. He's shown he can compete versus these grapplers. The Ray Soria loss most recently. He did have moments where he was starting to come on. The Tatsuro Taira one was just not his night. So I think if Nate Maness isn't available, if he doesn't end up re-signing with the UFC, or Van wants to get in there sooner, then that is resolved. Carlos Hernandez is a good one, and I think it would just be a good change of pace for Carlos Hernandez. I know maybe this doesn't match up perfectly with like them meeting at points in their career, like with how their records are going at the moment, but a lot of the flyweights are matched up right now, so it is what it is. This is who's available, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's a matchup that could do good for both guys. Give Hernandez a chance to strike with somebody who's not strictly going to spam takedowns. Next up, the winner, Charles Johnson, 3-0. He's on a 3-fight win streak after dropping 3, and he had 2 wins before that. He's had a very roller coaster career. He hits a streak and he holds that streak for a bit. Losses, wins, whatever it is. He's riding the high right now, beating a huge prospect in Joshua Van with a knockout. Before that, Jake Hadley. Before that, Azat Maxum. So he's on quite some run right now. I did have him matched up, so I just changed this right before I started recording. I just looked at the actual, not my unranked rankings, but the actual updated UFC rankings, because they got updated yesterday. We had, why can't I remember his name? Sumadarji in at the 15 spot for the flyweight rankings, so I made that matchup. I thought Sumadarji's lost twice, I believe, recently, been finished by 2 grapplers, so obviously this will give him a chance to strike too, and we know he can be a really fun striker to watch, and Charles Johnson wants in on those rankings. But wake up, I believe it was yesterday. I didn't change it until just now, but yesterday the rankings change. Asu Almabayev, without a win, is now jumped into that 15 spot. He didn't win or anything this past weekend to get that spot. I think they just wanted Sumadarji out of the rankings. So he takes that spot. I think this is a fair fight. Both guys, I believe, are on 3-fight win streaks currently. Asu might be 4. It's either, I know Charles is 3 for sure. Asu might be 3, might be 4. But either way, undefeated in the UFC for him so far. I think this is a good, this 15 rank for me is unclaimed because nobody won a fight to get it. So I think 2 guys that deserve to fight for that spot, Asu Almabayev, Charles Johnson, get that fight made. Whoever wins earns that 15 spot, is not just gifted it. Then we move on. C-Rod, that lost to Julian Erosa. He's had some ups and downs in his UFC career so far. Obviously at 135 pounds he was cooking, but he tended to have trouble making weight. And he was kind of just killing prospects, or not killing, but putting a roadblock in for prospects. Raul Rosas, Cameron Simon. His debut, short notice, up a weight class, 145, loses to JSP, Jonathan Pierce. And then most recently, after his last 135 pound win, he moves up to 45 to combat those weight cut issues, I assume. He gets a win. We come back, and it was against Isaac Dolgarian. We come back, same weight class, 145 pounds, and we lose to Julian Erosa. He gets choked out early. It was a firefight for as long as it lasted. They were both kind of slinging. Neither of them hurt each other, but they definitely stumbled each other a little bit, each of them. Big shots from both of them. And then C-Rod gets the takedown, and Julian Erosa is just lanky, and obviously his jiu-jitsu is nice. So snuck in that guillotine, locked it up. C-Rod taps. So interesting to see if he's going to try and fix those 135-pound weight cut issues, or if he's going to keep going at 145 pounds, knowing that these bigger guys could end up being an issue for him. It'll be interesting to see. Regardless, though, I did a matchup for him at 145 pounds, just because that's what he fought at most recently, and there's no reason to think otherwise. I say we go with Billy Q. This is, I believe, C-Rod was on like 4 or 5 in a row. I believe it was 4 in a row in the UFC, and then he drops this one. Billy Q's kind of been back and forth, but he's been in and not in, but around the outside of the rank. He might have been in at the tail end, maybe 15. Maybe he touched 15 at one point, but he's definitely been right under the rankings. He's fought ranked guys, got knocked out by Edson Barbosa, and recently he's been win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. But he's experienced, been in there with some really good guys, and I think this would be a good fight for each of them. It would be a good win on Billy Q's resume if he's able to get that done, and C-Rod needs a turnaround fight to get back on track. I think this is a good opponent for it. And this, again, would be another fun fight. These guys are both willing to put themselves in the fire to get what they want, so this would be a really fun fight. Next up, the winner, Julian Erosa. He is never in a dull fight, always awesome, and I think a fight where we could get some sick grappling exchanges, it would be really fun. And these two guys are floating around that, like, maybe not 16, but like 20 to 25 range, 20 to 30 range, so not quite in the 5 outside of the rankings, but just under that. The man who I just mistaked for JSP, Jonathan Pierce. I think this would be a fun one. He's recently coming off of a loss to 2 losses, I believe. He was dominating Joe Anderson Brito, talking shit, telling him do something about it because Brito was mad. He kept taking him down, and then Brito did something about it and submitted him. Then he goes out there and fights David Onama, who looked fantastic. I was very pleasantly surprised with. The scrambles were fantastic from David Onama, which surprised me. I thought JSP was going to dominate this fight on the ground. But I think this was a good get-back fight for JSP, see if he can get back on track versus a tough vet who's been in there with some good guys. And a surging vet right now. I believe he's on 2 wins in a row, 2 finishes if I'm not mistaken. I believe he just also finished Ricardo Ramos. So this is also a very subbable fighter for Julian Erosa, so if he can go out there and get that done. 3 wins in a row, 3 submissions would look pretty good on his resume towards working him up towards the rankings, and JSP needs to get back on track. This would be a fun fight. Like I said, the scrambles, the possibility of scrambles could be really fun here. Obviously, Erosa's got that crazy jiu-jitsu, and JSP with the wrestling. I think the grappling could be really fun here. Next up, Gabriel Bonfim. He's kind of, I can't remember who he fought in his first 2 to get the wins. They were lower level guys. So he beats Trey Waters in Contender Series. Munir Lazez gets the 50-second choke. Trevin Giles, minute 15 choke. Loses to Nicholas Dalby, who is a massive step up, in my opinion, from Munir Lazez and Trevin Giles. Gets finished in that one, and then we take a step back down to the level of Trevin Giles, Munir Lazez in Andalusa. He gets that one done quite easily. This was, I said it beforehand in my my short TikTok main card prediction video. They were giving him a layup. They want to get him back in form, back in the win column. They were able to do that. I thought he was going to be able to find the submission, but he really just showed off a lot of his striking in this fight. I say we kind of go right in the middle of those two levels. Nicholas Dalby was a bit too high. He's touched the rankings before, maybe he deserved to touch the rankings, deserved a shot at the rankings in that little run he was on before his loss. And then, but still above Andalusa, Trevin Giles, Munir Lazez. And I think there are 2 guys that we could see him against. Gunnar Nelson, who knows where this guy is? I don't know what he's doing. Let's see. I can't even remember. I can't remember off the top of my head. I looked at it earlier, but when his last fight was. Gunnar Nelson. He beat Brian Barberena March of last year, so March 2023. We haven't seen him since then. Before that, beating Takashi Sato, and then before that, Gilbert Burns, Leon Edwards. So fighting some good opponents. Obviously loses to 2 good opponents, and then beats 2 guys he probably should beat. This feels like a good spot for one of these guys to build off of the other. If Gunnar Nelson can get this win, that would maybe not the big. It might be the biggest win of his career. Looking at like Alex Oliveira, maybe at the time that was a huge win for him, getting to fight Leon after, and then Gilbert. And honestly, at that time, 2019, Leon wasn't Leon. He was still probably a really highly rated guy, but he wasn't Leon now. 2019, Gilbert Burns, definitely not yeah, good fight there. But yeah, it would be a huge win for Gunnar Nelson, and then it would be showing that for Bonfim that he can win that step up against a step up from the Angelusas, and it would be a good spot for him to build off of. But like I said, nobody knows where Gunnar Nelson is, so I don't. Who knows? So I made another one. A guy on this card, Muslim Salikov. I feel like he's not the same as Gunnar Nelson, like fighting wise, but they're in around the same area. I feel like between the Angelusas and the Nicholas Dalbys, I believe they may have actually fought recently. Let's take a look. Yeah, he lost in 2023 to Nicholas Dalby, so right under the Nicholas Dalby level. Just got a win versus Ponzinibbio on the same card. Timeline-wise, it makes sense. Neither guy was hurt, I don't believe. Muslim Salikov might need to take a bit of time off because he's 800 years old, but who knows? I think either of these fights make sense for Gabriel Bonfim. They're, like I said, they're that step up from that lower level of fighter that he's beat, but a step under Dalby, guys that Dalby would beat. And we need to build him. He can't jump from Angelusa to Dalby. Like, that doesn't make sense. So, good matchup for him, I believe, either way. Next up, Drew Dober, who just lost to Gene Silva, the 145-pounder who took this fight on short notice, who had fought 2 weeks prior. So it's not a great look. It's tough because then you look at Gene Silva, and Twitter is absolutely glazing Gene Silva right now, and I'm not going to lie, I may be a part of the group, but it was extremely impressive. It's hard not to be that impressed, but on Drew Dober's side, it may not look the best considering where he's, like, how long he's been doing this. He probably should have been able to beat Gene Silva with the circumstances, but he was in a good spot before. Terrence McKinney, Rafael Alves, Bobby Green, all wins, then loses to Matt Frivola, then beats Ricky Glenn, gets another shot at the rankings, loses to Moicano. I thought he was going to get a fight versus the likes of, like, Joel Alvarez, Drakkar Klose, like those kind of guys, maybe even Diego Fajeda. These guys that are right outside the rankings that have been there for a bit. I thought he was kind of in that group, going to get that kind of fight. And obviously, I believe Mike Davis was in that group, so he was supposed to fight Mike Davis, and I would class Mike Davis with Joel Alvarez, Drakkar Klose. Who's the other guy I said? Why can't I remember? I just said it. You know who I'm talking about. But they're all kind of in that group right outside the rankings. Mike Davis falls out, so it's kind of an unfortunate spot. Now he may have to fight someone coming up, and there's someone coming up who I think could be a really fun fight for him. It is kind of a jump from his last fight, but I saw the matchup, and I thought this could be really fun, so I had to do it. Nazim Sadykhov. Let me pull him up. I believe he had won 3 in a row, and then had that draw. Let's see if it was 3. Okay, 3 if you count Contender Series. I'm not going to count that. So he's on a 2-fight win streak in the UFC. Evan Elder, Terrence McKinney. If he got that win versus Borshev, I think this was the perfect fight to make next. I believe it's maybe a bit of a stretch considering that it was a draw and then what happened to Borshev recently against Chase Hooper. But I love the fight. This would be an absolute barn burner considering how the Borshev-Sadykhov fight went. Absolute blood and guts all over the octagon. These dudes were just slinging at each other. It was a sick fight. And I think this could be along those lines. Both of these dudes have crazy chins, and they both have good power in their hands, both good strikers. Sadykhov could mix in the grappling, but he's not like top-level elite wrestler, so it would be manageable for Drew Dober, unless he's like getting hurt a lot in the fight, but this would be an absolute barn burner. I'd love to see it. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Drew Dober, if they make him kind of fight that like up-and-coming prospect type guy, or if they still give him a fight in that Mike Davis range because he took this on short notice and it was such a risky fight. We'll see. And then we get Gene Silva. I matched him up with 2 guys because who knows what he's going to do here. If he wants to stay at, maybe he felt good at 55, not having to cut a lot. Who knows? Maybe he wants to stay at 45 because the guys aren't as durable. Even though he was able to finish the 45, it was with a cut more than a like knocking him out. He's put his last 2 opponents out with punches at 45, so it'll be interesting to see which way he goes. I tend to believe he goes back down to 45. I think that makes the most sense. And somebody, all right, and again, I told you, Twitter is all over this guy right now. I was extremely impressed. I still am extremely impressed. I said I was extremely impressed after the Charles Jourdain fight. I talked about it, the way he just, and I know Jourdain may not be the most dangerous guy, but he had no respect for what Jourdain was doing, walked him down, was just too strong and powerful, and like almost like intimidating. And I thought that just that presence he had was impressive. And obviously the striking, he's extremely patient and extremely powerful. He's got some good creative striking too. The spinning elbows he was throwing, sick fighter. So I kind of jumped him, but I think wins in your second UFC fight against Charles Jourdain, and then and not just a win, a finish, a dominant finish, and then a really awesome finish 2 weeks later versus Drew Dober on short notice up a weight class. I think that earns you a good bit of respect, and that's kind of what I've given him with these fights. Somebody's lost 2 fights recently at 145 pounds, just got knocked out of the rankings, lost inside the rankings to Edson Barbosa, then got knocked out of the rankings and replaced by Diego Lopez. He's got to defend his spot outside the rankings versus Gene Silva. This would be a sick fight. We know what kind of fighter. The fight versus Edson Barbosa, it may not have been the most entertaining, but the way it started, it looked like it was going to go really good for Sadiq Yusuff, and then man, did the tides turn. So he needs to get a bit of confidence back. Maybe he's willing to take this fight right outside the rankings, and it's versus a guy who's got a lot of hype. Maybe he thinks he can shut down that hype, and I don't want to make too big of a jump to conclusions or anything, but I kind of think this is a very winnable fight for Gene Silva with the track record of Sadiq Yusuff's chin lately. So we'll see how that goes. And who knows, maybe I could be overdoing this and giving him far too much too soon. We'll see what the UFC does, but these are just fun matchups for me, and I think with what he did last, he's earned some respect. So I'm giving him that. Next up, 155 pounds. He was kind of he was kind of putting himself into that group with the Mike Davises, the Joel Alvarez, the Drew Dobers, the Jakar Closes. If he was able to get that win over Diego Ferreira, he would kind of sub out Diego Ferreira in that spot. But Ferreira gets the win. He stays with that little group. And if for some reason Gene Silva decides to stay at 55, the early stages of this fight when Rebecca has juice would be insane. The punches these guys would be slinging at each other. I think we'd get some good scrambles too, because Rebecca's obviously going to shoot takedowns, and Gene Silva is not a slouch on the ground, you could say. So I think the early doors of this fight would be extremely fun. And again, it is a bit of a jump, but after beating Drew Dober at 155 pounds, why not take on Mateusz Rebecca? Like, it's not a bigger task at all. It's definitely not. So I don't even think Sadiq Yusuff isn't even a bigger task than Drew Dober at this point, I don't think. So who knows? Maybe I'm overdoing it a bit too much, but I was extremely impressed. I probably said it 800 times, but yeah, we'll go with those two. Then we get to the main event, Tracy Cortez, Rose Namajunas. This doesn't really affect too much for Tracy Cortez for me. It was, obviously, she didn't look the best. She came on strong in that 5th round. She looked all right in those last 2 rounds, but the first 3 rounds she had absolutely nothing for Rose. I do want to say, though, short notice, she had a matchup booked. She was training for somebody else. It was a big jump in level 2. I believe she might have been the one scheduled for Miranda Maverick. That's why I said that earlier for Jastovicius. Which also didn't make sense considering she had just won and is in the rankings. Why would she have to fight someone out of the rankings? I don't know. But so I'm kind of glad she got a ranked fight. So that loss doesn't really do too much for me. Short notice at Elevation, where Rose trains, where Rose lives. There's 2 people here that you could do that are literally just above her and below her in the rankings. Vivian Araujo, again, maybe you do Ariana De Silva in place of this, and you swap with Jastovicius either way, just because that matchup was already made for Jastovicius. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. Ariana Silva, Vivian Araujo, Karini Silva, all of these make sense to me. Tracy Cortez is, I believe, 13. Silva is 14. Karini Silva and Vivian Araujo is 1 spot above Tracy Cortez. Maybe with the loss, you want to make her fight the up-and-coming prospect that's a spot below her, and she had a fight outside of the rankings before that. Maybe for saving this card taking such a risk on short notice against Rose Namajunas. Big jump in level of fight you're taking at elevation where Rose lives. Maybe you grant her a little grace and give her the one right above her who's had a couple losses recently. I don't know. I think either one makes sense. I wouldn't be mad either way this goes. I think, like I said, any of these make sense. And then we get to Rose Namajunas. She called for the title. No. I believe she's on a two-fight win streak after that Firo loss. I believe she beat Ribas and now the Tracy Cortez win. A short notice at elevation, Tracy Cortez doesn't earn you. And again, she looked good early. She did what she had to do, but it wasn't spectacular by any means. If she had gone out there, dropped Tracy Cortez like she did, and then hunted the finish, maybe found the submission, was able to get a little ground and pound going, was able to have her stand back up and put some more punches on her, get the fight over with, maybe then we can talk. But for me, reschedule the Maycee Barber fight. It literally makes the most sense. Let me see. Is this a long-term injury for Maycee Barber? I think it'll say it on Tapology here. No, it just says Barber withdrew, so I don't know off the top of my head what the injury was, if she's going to be out for a long time. I've seen people say on Twitter this makes the most sense, and I agree, so I assume she's not going to be out for a ridiculously long time, and Rose just fought, so maybe their timelines will match up again. I think this fight makes the most sense. Rose now on 2 wins, hunting to get back to that title. The tear Maycee Barber is on currently, 5 in a row, 6 in a row. Miranda Maverick, Montana De La Rosa, Jessica Ai, Andrea Lee, finishing Amanda Ribas, like Rose Namajunas did not, and then beating Caitlin Sermonara, or Caitlin Chukagian as she was formerly known as. She's 9-2 in the UFC, only losses versus Roxanne Modafferi and Alexa Grasso, and that was, the Modafferi loss isn't great, but it is what it is. The tear she's on right now, she deserves the Rose Namajunas fight, and then maybe the winner, it gets like Blanchfield, or let me look at the rankings right now. Blanchfield, or the loser of Grasso Shevchenko, or if Shevchenko doesn't want to fight at the Sphere again and they do Firo Grasso, maybe they get the loser of that, or they fight Shevchenko. There's a lot of options here. But regardless, that's it. The matches have been made. The fights have been made. I think there's a lot of fun fights on this. We'll see if any of them actually happen this weekend. Before I say that, I'm still figuring out how I want to make the videos, but I do want to get these unranked ranking videos out. I'll brainstorm. Maybe they come out next week. Maybe they come out in the next few days. I'll figure out how to do it. But then this weekend, we've got an absolute barn burner of a main event. Amanda Lemos, Verna Jandiroba. Yeah. I'll see you guys for this extraordinary fight card.